All right, welcome back. I'm taking a look at page 9 of the Standard this morning. There's an amazing article there. Remember the artist who did the song Tibim last year during the election period? So he has a new song. This is on page 9 of our newspaper, and of course, it's also on the cover of it. But on page 9 of the Daily News, or of the Standard this morning, it says that the popular artist Joseph Onyango Ochieng, who is the engineer and the creative mind behind Uhuru, or rather Raila Uhuru Tibim, the new song that he has just released after Raila and Uhuru shook hands, that great hand. So Onyango 33, whose song Raila Tibim ruled the airwaves and became NASA's campaign anthem, said that he's very happy with the handshake that happened between President Uhuru Kenyatta and his counterpart Raila Odinga. So he's gone to praise both of them, and this is fantastic. He says that that specific song sold over 10,000 copies, and he goes on to tell us that the meaning of Tibim and Tialala, both first uttered in public by former University Nairobi student leader Babu Owino during a student strike, are unknown. All right, so that is quite an interesting story on page 9 that is quite a breather. So he says that Joseph Onyango Ochieng is quite proud that President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga shook hands, and now he has a new song called Raila and Uhuru Tibim. That's on page 9. But now let me take you back to the very first page of our newspaper this morning. The headline there is Mudavadi's bitter pill for Raila Odinga. That specific story is on page 8, but it goes on to say that we have an exclusive interview with the Standard this morning that NASA found and co-principal tears into Raila for betraying their cause and predicts that a stronger coalition will emerge with new realignment. All right, but I'll take you deeper into that, but there's also the relief at last. The National Youth Service bus in traffic on Racecourse Road, Nairobi yesterday, because the government agencies has driven it into cartels, controlled passenger service sector, and matatu operators have vowed to sabotage it. And of course, there are going to be new prices. Let me tell you about those new prices, all right? So let me head over to page 7. Oh, the numbers will shock you. So especially if you're used to paying, let's say, about 100 Kenyan shillings, at worst 120 Kenyan shillings, because passengers will now pay a flat rate, guess this, of 20 bob, down from the initial 50 Kenyan shillings to 20 bob. And this is during peak hours on these routes. So commuters heading to places as far like Dandora, for instance, who normally pay 100 Kenyan shillings during peak hours, 120 when it's raining, will now be able to pay just 20 bob, courtesy of these NYS buses. And those going to Mwiki, who pay 80 Kenyan shillings during peak hours, but it can go up to 100 Kenyan shillings when it rains, will also be able to take part in that specific 20 bob flat rate that we'll see. So these new NYS buses that we are seeing, could we be seeing a return of the Nyayo bus, a widely successful government-run commuter bus service that dominated Kenya in the late 1980s? I'll let you grab a copy of the Standard this morning, and all those details are there. But those new prices, will the cartels in Nairobi allow this to happen? And could we be seeing a return of the Nyayo bus that was run successfully in the 1980s until a corruption scandal happened and we saw embezzlement happen, and that's the downfall of the KBS. But that story is on page 7. Yet another interesting story. Apart from that, of course, it's that Mudavadi story. Allow me to stay a little bit on that. So let's head over to page 8. Page 8 is that exclusive interview that we managed to get. Mudavadi says that Raila betrayed NASA. Apart from the fact that we saw the co-principals meeting earlier this week and giving a press briefing, Raila Odinga also met U.S. Ambassador to Kenya, Robert Godek, on Wednesday. And Godek and a few of the Western diplomats, leaders, fell out with NASA and the entire team after they recognized Uhuru Kenyatta's win back in October 26. But Mudavadi goes on to say that the outcome of Wetangula was well choreographed to scheme in the Senate to humiliate him. We also know that James Orengo now has become the new minority leader. But Could this be the new divorce, a beginning of the new divorce for NASA? But also we know that the ANC, Wiper and Ford Kenya plan to form a new alliance excluding Raila Odinga. But poor numbers both in Senate and the National Assembly, will that allow it? So we have an exclusive story in regards to that. So Musalia Mudavadi outrightly dismissed Raila Odinga as a betrayer. Yesterday, the Amani National Congress leader tore into the deal between President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, describing it as hollow, selfish and meaningless to NASA's structured cause. That story is on page 8, that exclusive interview of Mudavadi. And those are the three top stories on the Saturday Standard this morning. The NYS bus, how those flat rates have moved from 50 Kenyan shillings to a whopping 20 bob. And of course, Mudavadi's bitter pill of Raila Odinga. And as I earlier mentioned, we also Raila Odinga shaking hands with Robert Godek. But could Raila's exit out of NASA, or the exclusion of him from the new team that is going to be formed, meaning that we could see a divorce from NASA? And I'll also let you read more details on that new song, Uhuru Raila Tibim, all right? That is on the Standard, the Saturday Standard this morning. But let's head over to the Saturday Nation. The Saturday Nation are running with a different article, or a different headline. Of course, they still have their hand on why Uhuru and Raila crafted a secret meeting or a secret deal. Now, the leaders feared that the race for the 2022 presidential election could cloud talks. And of course, the electoral justice pushed by NASA and the Big Four agenda on Jubilee were among the issues on the table. So on page 6 of the Saturday Nation is where you'll get the details of that secret deal that went down. But I want to bring your attention to something. And this is the story on what to combat if we want to combat poverty. Family data holds the key. This is on the Saturday Nation. It says that the reason why some families remain poor while others prosper can now be laid bare thanks to a new study whose far-fetching results were made public on Thursday. So some of the details, allow me to share some of those numbers. 33.2% of rural poor have no formal education, compared to only 17% among urban. These are a bit scary numbers. Now, another nationally, 29.1% of the poor households have more than 7 children. Another number, 45.2%. In rural areas, that is 45.2% of poor households have 4 to 6 children, compared to 47.9% of poor households in urban areas. Now, nationally, 52% of poor households are headed by a person with primary education. So if we want to combat poverty, then it all has to start at the household level. And that's an amazing story, both on page 4 and 5 of the Saturday Nation. But also in the Saturday Nation, KQ has also taken a center stage, saying that they want to recall the leased aircraft that they leased out to Oman Air, saying that they want to prepare for the maiden flight to New York, US, come October. So they are calling for both of those two flights that they leased to Oman Air back in 2016. That specific story can be found on page 37. But allow me to take it deeper with that story of the family and how we as a nation can combat poverty. So allow me to turn to page 4 and 5. All right, here are a few of the numbers I'd love to share with you. 1, 2, or 3 households with 1 to 3 members recorded at least poverty headcount of 14.7%, compared to 54.1% of the households with 7 or more members. The age of 20 to 29 years old households headed by people in this specific age bracket registered the lowest poverty indices at 15.9%. The reason I feel that, or I believe this is quite important, is just that last week on Sunday, here on Weekend Express, we still talked about how Kenyan households can combat themselves ahead of the inflation that we are seeing, because as a country, we are in about 4.5 trillion debt, which is set to go even higher as we prepare for fuel prices to increase. So what does this mean for families within Kenya? More so, how can we prepare for that? I believe that's an important article on page 4 and 5 of the Saturday Nation. I'll leave at that, and I'll let you grab both copies, both the Saturday Standard as well as the Saturday Nation, both running with different stories, one on Mudavadi and the other one on that specific new findings on poor households. And of course, KQ recalling that that aircraft. But when we come back after this short break, it's those two interviews rather that I promised you. We'll get to talk to 3, or should I say 5 amazing boys on their stories, 3 men rather, and 2 boys on their amazing story, and we get to hear from them in this rehabilitation center, which is doing